From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us. You can always email us, podcast@scottishrite.org. Do need to talk to you about the Scottish Rite Leadership Workshops. They are coming up in March and April. There are 3 happening across those 2 months: Charlotte, San Diego, and St. Louis. If you go to scottishrite.org, you will see the information about the Scottish Rite workshops. You need to make it a point to be there if it's possible, if it's in the length of your cable toe, as we say. Get yourself there. These are going to be a fantastic opportunity for you to learn more about the Scottish Rite, learn more about what you can do to help the fraternity and grow, and not only that, but get some really valuable leadership lessons for yourself. Complete list of what's going to be happening at the workshops is going to be available at scottishrite.org. And I do want to make mention of this one special thing. You may have heard talk about it already. Our illustrious Grand Commander, Brother James D. Cole, 33rd degree, he is going to be doing a bit of a town hall, if you will, sort of a Q&A with the Grand Commander. It's your opportunity to meet him, to ask questions, and to find out what his thoughts are, what his plans are, and what the direction of the Scottish Rite will be for the next couple of years. So do yourself a favor, check that out at scottishrite.org. I've got a really cool guest coming up. This is Brother Ted Bastine, and he is a Canadian Scottish Rite Mason and a past master at that. And Brother Ted is the artist behind the Scottish Rite Journal feature, Chips from the Quarry, which is a short group of biographies about famous Masons and Scottish Rite Masons. You've definitely seen this. This month's, the January-February issue of the Scottish Rite Journal features Masons who were chocolatiers or involved in the candy-making business. A little tribute to Valentine's Day. It's on page 14 of your journal or in your Scottish Rite Journal app if you check it out in the app. And Brother Ted Bastine is joining us now on the phone. Brother Ted, how did you get started doing Chips from the Quarry?
Well, I think it started back when we were doing, we did a series of stories called Brother, Brother, where it was like, it was Tim O'Halloran, I believe, who wrote it. And it was like the bumbling stories of like Victorian era Mason, who he was just like the most incompetent guy ever. And so it was all about his misadventures. That ran for quite a while. It was actually compiled into a book.
I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with the exploits of Brother Brother.
We eventually moved on to the Chips from the Quarry after some of those other things had played out. And that's been going for a while now, too. I've been dealing with Brent there for quite a while now, over 10 years, I believe.
Well, your art is extraordinary. You're obviously very, very talented guy. How does the workflow on Chips from the Quarry work? I mean, you write it, they give you a theme. How exactly does that take shape?
There's been 2 authors on it so far. Mark Dresnia, he's the current author, and the previous author, he stepped away, I think, for personal reasons.
I believe that would have been Brother Greg Kearse.
Yes, it was. And then, so the process is basically like they'll do the script for me, and then it's up to me to come up with something visually to go with the script and the different spots about the different people we're talking about, and whatever the theme is for that version of Chips. And then I'll basically go to the internet and find reference for the people themselves, and then try to come up with like some kind of theme that connects it all together, whether it's a background or a border or something that kind of holds it all together. And I do the initial, like even the typesetting for it, and then I leave the open file so that Brent can edit it if he wishes. And I transmit it digitally to them, which is great nowadays. Compared to the old days of paper and airbrush and everything, which
sure.
I feel no, I don't miss them. So that's okay. Everything's digital nowadays. The pencil ink I really like still, but the coloring it with paint and airbrush, and right now, if you can leave the file open in layers, and even if your client wants to alter something, they can do it themselves. You don't have to repaint it all. So everything's easy to redo or fix or move around. You don't even have to ship anything anymore. You just transmit it and it gets there, like Dropbox or something like that.
So is graphic art, is that your day job? Is this what you do for a living in general?
Animator by my diploma. I graduated from Sheridan College in Oakville. It's near Toronto up here, which is kind of the place to go for animation in Canada. And I've been in the industry for 35 years. And I direct children's cartoons. I'm directing a show called Paw Patrol right now.
Oh, Paw Patrol is huge, man. It's huge in my house.
Like if you have kids, you know what we're doing, right? So I came in on the third season of Paw Patrol, and I've been on there up to, like, we're working on season 7 now. And I've directed things like Magic School Bus, and back in the day when everything was done by hand, with pencils, all the way to digital time.
Wow, you're raising my street cred with my kids, because Paw Patrol, absolutely a phenomenon. If you've got kids or grandkids, you definitely know what Paw Patrol is. That animation has to be a tremendously challenging field to get into.
Well, actually, in Toronto here, it's really busy right now, and it's hard to find enough people to do it. The thing was, at one time, back in the days of Saturday morning cartoons, and a lot of the work, like, we would work on a project to a certain point, and then ship it overseas to a studio in Asia, like Korea or China, to finish the show, like in color. But with the advent of computers, you don't need as many bodies to make the show. So a lot of the work has actually come back to North America. So if it's a 2D show, that looks like what we're used to call animation, and the backgrounds have to be painted. They're painted digitally, and you still need background painters to do that. In 3D, we have to build everything almost like live action, like you're building a set, or you build the vehicles. They're all built in the program, and they have to be, they have to be built. Then they have to be rigged so the animators can move them and make them do whatever they have to do. And then they have to be surfaced, which means somebody has to basically paint it and put textures on it so it looks like metal or paint or whatever. And same with the characters have to be rigged so that their eyes blink and all their joints move. And that takes a lot of people. So I think we have at least a couple hundred on Paw Patrol alone.
How long does it take you to put together a single half-hour episode of a show like Paw Patrol? Is that, obviously it takes some time. I mean, weeks, months?
It takes months because it goes through various stages where we have to, first you have to get it written. You have to have a script, then a storyboard is done. And then that's launched to the studio so that all the different department heads could see what we have to do for this episode, what things we already have, what new things we have to build. And then it goes to pre-biz where someone does a rough take on the whole show in 3D. And then it goes to layout. Then it goes to animation. And then it goes further on, to rendering and compositing. And so it takes quite a while. It takes, a year.
Wow. And by contrast, something like Chips from the Quarry probably is a couple hours.
That's about a day of work. And I also have other little freelance projects that I do that I have to, leave time for as well.
Now, Masonically, you are a pretty active guy. So give us a shout out to your home lodge.
Well, I'm past master at Joseph A. Hearn Lodge, number 685 in Port Credit, Ontario, in West District. So I'm a past master there. I'm also a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. Yes, in the Toronto Valley.
Ted, I'm just scrolling through your IMDb page real quick, and I mean, you have done some really cool things. Do you have a favorite that you worked on?
One project I was on a little while ago was a Disney project called Handy Manny.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how many episodes of Handy Manny you directed, but I'm sure I've seen it 5 times at least, because Handy Manny was my son's absolute favorite cartoon.
I directed everything on Handy Manny. It was like 7.5 years.
That is too cool.
Nice long-term gig, and Disney the client where it was great to work with, and it wasn't, it's a fun show, so it wasn't like Paw Patrol. It's kind of like not really like working. I couldn't imagine having a real job, right? So.
Amen to that. I mean, I have to tell you, Ted, I could talk to you all day. I am a cartoon lover, and some of the stuff you've worked on is just fantastic. And it's so cool to know that there is a Masonic connection to some of our favorite cartoons. It's a cool thing. We have a Masonic connection historically in cartoons through Brother Mel Blanc, who was a Scottish Rite Mason in the Valley of Los Angeles and a very active Scottish Rite Mason, in fact. And it's just cool that legacy sort of continues in your work and in the pages of the Scottish Rite Journal through Chips from the Quarry. So thank you for taking time. I do have to ask, are you hiding little Masonic messages inside some of the cartoons that you do?
We have to influence their minds young. Yes, we have to. The New World Order.
Oh, geez, we better stop before the tinfoil hat squad gets on our case. And we should say that we are definitely, absolutely kidding about any of that. Brother Ted, thank you so much for joining me. I can talk to you all day about this stuff. I am a cartoon lover and always have been, and it's just so neat that, Masons are found in every clime, including Paw Patrol, including Handy Manny, including some of your favorite kids' cartoons. It's just such a neat thing that not only is Ted found in the pages of the Scottish Rite Journal and Chips from the Quarry, but also when you turn on the Cartoon Network or wherever you're watching your cartoons, you're likely to see his work there as well. Brother Ted, thank you for joining us. This is the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd Degree, KCCH. Switching gears and chatting with our brother Grand Archivist, Arturo de Hoyos. So I haven't actually sat down with you in a little bit, Art, but I'm glad that you're joining us in the studio here now because we have a couple of important things first, we have to catch up on trivia. And secondly, I started the show off with a mention of the Scottish Rite leadership workshops, and you're actually going to be the keynote speaker at the leadership workshops. You're also going to do some Q&A stuff like you always do, some Scottish Rite trivia like we do here. We're going to do those things. But one of the things you're going to talk about is what makes Scottish Rite Freemasonry and Freemasonry itself different from other fraternal organizations out there like the Lions Club or the Kiwanis. And you're going to talk specifically about what sets Freemasonry apart. Give us a little tidbit, if you would.
Well, I mean, as most of us know, these other organizations are generally considered to be service organizations that are kind of fraternal, but Freemasonry is truly a fraternity. That's probably the biggest difference, and we'll discuss some of those things when I get there. Masons have particular responsibilities to each other that we learn about in the degrees that are absent from these other service type organizations. Some of the other organizations are tied around business, for example. Freemasonry, that's something that's almost prohibited, as you know. Mm-hmm. We don't do electioneering or politicking or promote businesses within Freemasonry. If you do business with a Mason, that's fine. We might prefer to do business with a Mason for various reasons, but that's not the purpose of the organization. And of course, we have a type of symbolism, code of conduct, these things that reach way back in the fraternity that make us distinct from the other organizations. And the greatest thing that I see in it also is that Freemasonry has a goal of seeking light and knowledge or truth, which these other organizations don't.
I think that's such an important thing. And I was in a Masonic meeting not all that long ago, and I repeated to the brothers a quote. I don't know where it came from. I don't remember. It might have been you. It might have been someone else. It said, basically, if you went to church and no one spoke about God, you'd be kind of ticked that you went to church. It's not just about barbecue, and it's not just about donuts in the fellowship hall after the Sunday meeting. It's about what you're learning when you're there. Likewise, it's nice to have fellowship after a meeting or to go have a mini golf outing with the guys or something like that. But if you're not in lodge practicing Freemasonry and learning about Freemasonry, you're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. My good friend, illustrious Pete Norman from Texas, gives a talk about King Solomon's Yacht Club, in which he talks about how there are organizations that get together and they have their specific purposes, but, and they might sing, a sea chanty or something like this. But if we're getting together at a Masonic lodge and we're not discussing Freemasonry, we're really missing out. I've been to many great meetings that were fun and enjoyable, but they were not really Masonic. I'm not saying that there's not a place for hearing something from the fire marshal, but Personally, I don't go to lodge for that. I go to lodge for Freemasonry because that's what you can get at a Masonic meeting that you cannot get elsewhere. And that's the point that Pete makes and some other people like you are talking about here, is that, the donuts are great and it depends what kind of donuts they are.
Indeed, it does.
I'm an apple fritter guy myself.
I'm a sour cream donut guy.
I'll take that too, unless they're good chocolate donuts, but that's another story altogether.
We can have the Masonic donut debate all day.
That's right. And don't forget, in the Valley of Alexandria, we serve chocolate milk too, so just saying.
No, we don't do that. But we have started to steer away from some of your, and I'm not disparaging them, some of the larger chain style donuts, because now there are artisan donuts being shared different places.
Oh, that sounds kind of hoity.
Have you never heard those?
Hoity-toity, but no, you're absolutely right. But that, again, that's a whole nother fraternity,
sure, right.
But yeah, absolutely, but the one thing that we do seek at Masonic meetings, obviously, every candidate kneels and they say, what do you want? Light. And so we aim to give that.
Yeah, it was. I heard a venerable master in a particular valley, and it wasn't one of mine, but I was visiting, and he stood up and he said, we've tried, going to a baseball games, we've tried this, we've tried that, and somebody stood up and said, well, have we tried Masonry? And it really kind of hit everybody in the room pretty hard.
I love that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Sometimes the simplest answer is sitting there staring you right in the face.
Well, it's why we all joined. It's what but there's this thinking that people aren't going to be interested in that, because sometimes there are aspects of Masonic study that can be a little bit dry, and you think that maybe people might not be interested in it. But I think it's our job to find what a particular lodge, what aspect of Masonry excites that particular lodge, and focus on that.
Absolutely. I'm kind of like Pike in the sense that I'm not comparing myself to Pike, but Pike said that
your beard is nothing compared to his.
Well, you should have seen him back in the 80s. In any case, Pike said that he was a Mason and there was nothing about Masonry that was uninteresting to him. And I have to honestly say I'm pretty much the same way. It's history, ritual, symbolism, philosophy, all of that stuff, really, I love it. And I think that there's something there for everybody. It's the purpose of Freemasonry isn't to be a charitable organization, but charity naturally flows from it, for example. So there really is something there for everybody in Freemasonry. If you can find your niche if you look hard enough.
And I think this will be a great talk for our leadership workshops, because it's something that the leaders and the future leaders of Scottish Rite Valleys need to hear, that Freemasonry has to be our focus. The extra social activities we do, they're fun, they're great, they're a nice add-on, but they are the peas and the potatoes. They are not the meat that should be on the plate in your Masonic lodge, really.
Amen. And when you talk to Texas Masons, believe me, we know all about having good steak. I hear you.
All right, let's catch up on our trivia. Last month, and let's see if you can answer this one, because a lot of guys got this one. Brent Pitt was a pinch hitter for you, and the question was, there is a famous Christmas song that is tied to two illustrious 20th century Scottish Rite Masons. Do you know the song?
Ooh, a Christmas song.
A very famous Christmas song.
Oh gosh, would it be something like White Christmas?
No, not that one, but that's a good guess. This is tied.
Wasn't that Irving Berlin?
That was Irving Berlin. Yeah,
the Mason,
he was. Okay. But this is tied very particularly and very specifically to two Scottish Rite Masons.
Two Scottish Rite Masons,
and it involves a caribou with a particular proboscis.
A caribou? Oh, really? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Well, one would be with Burl Ives.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the other connection there?
Gene Autry had the first hit recording of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the 40s, and then when it was an ad for Montgomery Wards, he had the first hit record with it. And then Burl Ives obviously was in the 1968 Rankin and Bass special and had a hit record with it in his own recording.
Okay, I can see it.
That's a great one. That's a good question.
Pretty cool.
So all of you who wrote in and had Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Irving Berlin and Burl Ives and Gene Autry, that is the correct answer, and we're going to draw out a winner from that. Your question from November, which lingers over us, is which Masonic degree influenced the Royal Ark Mariner degree? And the Royal Ark Mariner degree in and of itself is pretty fascinating if you do any reading about it. Your question spurred me to do a little bit of research a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's a really neat thing. So I'm going to ask you a question about those Allied Masonic degrees in a second. But we've had everything from the third degree to the Mark Mason degree to Royal Arch degrees, so let them off the hook.
Now, well, I haven't heard the answer yet, but I will tell you the answer. In the introduction to my reprint of the reprints of Rituals of Old Degrees, which was a bonus book for the Scottish Rite Research Society a year or two ago, in the introduction, I mentioned that there were degrees that were practiced in the Caribbean in the French language, and many of these degrees had come from English-speaking sources. An early version of the Royal Master degree, not the version that's used today, but the Royal Master degree influenced the Royal Ark Mariner degree. The passwords were, I think, if not identical, very much similar.
Interesting. I don't think anybody got that one, so that one was a stumper. Before we go on to this month's question, the Allied Masonic degrees, they can be a little bit confusing. It's an invitation-only type of thing. There's only a handful of guys from each chapter that are allowed to be in. So I know this is a bigger question than we have time for, but the Allied Masonic degrees, if you had to do an elevator pitch.
Gosh, I don't know that there is an elevator pitch, but these were degrees that were kind of loosely conferred and controlled, and probably in the beginning of the late 1700s. Some of the degrees, I believe, were published in the early 1800s in Carlyle's Manual of Freemasonry, and out of those, that was in England. And out of that collection, these bodies were formed. The United States formed a group, I believe, first in the late 1800s. But some of these degrees have really old aspects to them. I mean, like I say, 1700s, maybe even mid-1700s. They're really interesting degrees. Royal Ark Mariner that you mentioned, for example, the Worshipful Commander Noah is the head of that degree. And you think, well, that's kind of an odd thing. But if you remember your Masonic history, the Noahite degree
predates the Hieronymic degrees.
That's right. It was an early inspiration for the legend of the Master Mason's degree. So it's, to me personally, interesting to look at some of those older degrees because you never know what you're going to find in there. But in any case, there is a Grand Council of Allied Masonic degrees, and this body's going to meet at Masonic Week in 3 weeks from now, something like that, coming up, second week of February. And this year I have the honor of serving as the Sovereign Master, in fact, of a Nine Muses Council of the Allied Masonic degrees.
So is it a progression like the Scottish Rite is? Like you have to become a secret master before you become an intimate secretary? You have to kind of go through that? Or is it you can cafeteria style this and you can become one of these, but you don't have to become one of those? I mean, or is it depend?
It's really kind of like a whole gambit of degrees. So when you join it, you do get all of these degrees. Or it's different in the United States versus Europe. Degrees are a little bit different. The seals are a little bit different, the badges. But they're very comparable. I don't know that there's ever been a really good history written of them as I think about this. But like I say, Ark Mariner, Tylers of Solomon, there's Select Masons at 27.
Yeah, Tylers of Solomon, I saw that looked like a kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, I was going to say is that there's some of these degrees kind of look like they were like loosely allied and that they were kind of like just artificially like put together. Whereas the degrees in the Scottish Rite had like more of coherence to them. Mm-hmm. These degrees kind of arbitrarily came together almost. I
mean, were these, fraternities and lodges that sort of popped up and tried to make a go of it on their own and then ended up loosely affiliating with Masonry and, similar to the Order of the Mechanics or things like that? Or these were just somebody wrote a degree and a lodge put it on kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it was more the latter, is that these are interesting degrees that were worked in some region. A lodge may have had control over it, and that they were just like kind of loosely allied. Well, we have this degree and we have this degree, but eventually they collected them together. And
right. Makes sense. Okay. But, I know it's an invitation only thing. The question then is, how do you get an invitation? It's kind of, to me, it reads a little, when I've done a little research on it, reads a little like, the first rule of Fight Club is there is no Fight Club. So you can't ask, but you have to ask, sort of a catch-22 type of thing.
I never really thought about it that way, but I think you're right. And well, there's a lot of invitational groups in Freemasonry anyway. So, but I mean, if you're aware that there is a body around you, I mean, you could certainly express your interest to one of the members to say, oh, those are really interesting degrees. What are the names or what are they about? In general terms, you can look them up in a Masonic encyclopedia or dictionary or something like that anyway.
Interesting stuff. Definitely interesting stuff. Thank you for the insight. Now, 2020's first trivia question, if you would, please.
Which body do the rituals published in Scottish Rite Masonry Illustrated represent?
That should be relatively easy for somebody to figure out.
Yes and no.
Uh-oh. I hate when he's got that look on his face.
Wait a minute. I look like this all the time.
No, that particular grin, I recognize it as being a little trickier than maybe this is a little more difficult than it might seem.
Well, it is tricky, but it's not. This is a work that's been misunderstood by many people, but there are a couple places where I have explicitly written the answer, but I'm not going to tell you what those sources are, where I explicitly give the answer as to what ritual is represented, what Masonic organization is represented by those rituals.
That sounds like a charge from the Grand Archivist to me, fellas. So go ahead and hit the books. And as always, once you get the answer, send it to us at podcast@scottishrite.org. And do not forget one very important fact about sending in your answer.
And that is, it doesn't matter when you send it in because we don't select the winner until just before the podcast.
Art, thanks so much. Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. See you guys.
That is going to wrap it up for the January 2020 edition of the Tyler's Place podcast. And I'm going to give you a little tidbit right now, a little scoop, if you will. Going to be some changes coming up to the Tyler's Place podcast. Some really cool, some really good things that are coming. So keep your eye on all the Scottish Rite social media. Keep your ears open on the Scottish Rite podcast channels. In other words, the Tyler's Place podcast channel and the Scottish Rite Journal podcast channel. We have been working on some things, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised about some things that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So all I'll tell you to give you a little tidbit is just stay tuned on a more frequent basis. That is going to wrap things up, and I thank you for joining us as always here on the Tyler's Place podcast. You can write to us at any time, podcast@scottishrite.org. And don't forget, any of our Tyler's Place podcast episodes are always available. You can go back and listen to the older episodes at any time. They stay online forever and ever. And if there's a particular one that's interesting to you, hey, send it to a friend. We would love to spread a little bit of Scottish Rite light through the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH, and I'll catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place podcast.